he was the one who ended up spreading Chassidus. And he had all the big heavyweight Talmidim. The Baal Tanya was his Talmud, the Baal Afla was his Talmud, the Shmuel of Nikolsburg was a Talmud. He was like the main person who proliferated Chassidus. Okay, so let's talk about today's sponsorship, and then we can get started. This whole week's broadcast is sponsored by the Westbrook family, Legal Nishmas, both their grandparents, Shmuel Alexander ben Avram and Pessel Bas Meir Stern, and Moshe ben Avram and Miriam Bas Moshe Rappaport, who were killed on Yud Aleph Kislev, Hashem Yin Kandamim. And Mrs. Westbrook's, her father, his yahrzeit was yesterday, Yud Ches Kislev, Moshe and Shmuel Alexander Stern. Tina Shmosam, Suruda, Yitzhar Chaim. Okay. Good morning, Betsy. Good morning, Duvi. So let's see the head of the Gemara. Yesterday we discussed how when you travel, you should eat light, especially if you don't know where the next rest area is. However, there are certain people who are used to eating a lot, and even their light eating is pretty significant. Zok to Gemara, Papa, called Parsu, Parsa, Achol Chader Rifta. Every Parsa that he traveled, he ate a bread. So Rashi, Kosover of Papa, it's because it's going to give him an upset stomach. The Iu Rav Papa, he wasn't afraid of upset stomach. The Baal Beten Haya, or I think the test says Baal Basar Hava. Rav Papa was a large individual, and therefore he was able to handle industrial consumption. It was a wide stomach. So the Gemara says, the Gemara gets into detail of the anatomy of Rav Papa. I think he said if Rav Papa stood up against somebody else, a pair of oxen could walk in between them, like under their bellies. So they were pretty large individuals, and therefore they were able to eat more. So it could be on a regular day, Rav Papa ate 3 breads at a shot, and since he was traveling, he ate light, and every parsa he only ate 1 bread. Amrav Yehuda Amarav. You see, when you're in Amora, everything about your life gets exposed. There's nothing you could conceal. If someone is careful not to eat much, so he also participates in the hunger, even if he would have food for himself, but he withholds. He'll get saved from misa mishuna. And Rashi says, what does that mean? Any misa, or everything is the malach hamalvus, but any misa that's not only the malach hamalvus. So a misa mishuna is anything that's not just a natural death in bed. Everybody knows the very famous story when Reb Aaron Kotler Zatzal, during the war, needed to get the assistance of a mafia guy because there were Bachrim, B'nai Torah, that were stranded in Italy during the war. And this powerful mafia guy had connections in Italy where he would possibly be able to help. So Reb Aaron went with his right-hand man, Irving Bunim, to meet this mafia guy. And they brought 2 suitcases of cash because they knew that they were going to ask for a favor, but they would have to pay. So they went to meet the mafioso. They asked him for the favor, and he's looking at them. So they pull out a briefcase of cash, and they show it to him, and he goes, eh. So they figured, well, he wants more. It's because we brought a second briefcase. So they brought a second briefcase, and he said, eh. I don't want money from the rabbi. I want a blessing. So Irving Bunim tells Reb Aaron in Yiddish, Evila Bracha. Now, Reb Aaron didn't show much favor to any goyim, so he tells Irving Bunim, Zolar Paigerin. Zolar Paigerin, which is the word to describe the death of an animal. So Irving Bunim was very often put into very uncomfortable situations because Reb Aaron told him things in Yiddish that he had to translate in English in such a way where it would be accepted by the recipient. So he said, the rabbi said you should die a natural death like an animal dies in a field. So he liked that bracha. And 20, 30 years later, when Rabbi was no longer here, and Shneur Cutler was a Rosh Yeshiva, a limousine pulls up to Yeshiva, and it's totally the blade, and he wants to meet with the Rabbi Cutler. So Shneur comes out and says, how can I help you? So this head Matthew guy says, I want you to know my father just died, peacefully in his sleep. He's the first member of my family in the last 10 generations that didn't die a violent death, like gunned down or knifed or thrown into an ocean with cement boots. And my father said it must be due to the rabbi's blessing. So he asked Reb Shneur, can you please give me such a blessing? I also want such a blessing. So Shneur says, I'm not Rabbi. I can't do those things. Well, really, the bracha came from Irving Bunim. But that's how the story goes. Zok Tehillah Gemara. Shenemar, how do you know that someone will be saved from a Misa Meshuna if he suffers along with everybody else? Shenemar Barov Patcha Mimavas. Let's see if I can read it. Yeah, Barov Patcha Mimavas U'B'Mochama Midei Cherev. So, Frank the Gemara, what do you mean? What do you mean Birav? What do you mean Birav Patcha Mimavas? In the Rav, he'll be redeemed. May Rav you will be saved from the hunger. Therefore, we learn that the Torah is telling us a message. Bischar Shemar Atzmai Birav, due to the fact that you also acted with hunger. Vishnei Rabba, and even though maybe you had food for yourself and you could have indulged, Mitzvah Misa Mishuna, you'll be saved from a Misa Mishuna. Oh, Amar Shlakish. Rish Lakish said, Asar la'adam l'shamash mitasei. One is not allowed to be Isaac in intimacy, b'shnei Rabbi, in the years of hunger. Shenemar, it says, Ula Yosef yalad shnei banim v'terem tavay shnasarav. Why did the Torah have to stick in that Yosef's children were from before the Shnei Rav? To tell us that b'shas the Rav, Yosef would not have had children. Let's see Rashi. If someone participates in the tsar, when the tzibur is b'tzar, so he'll be saved. So from Rashi, it seems it's not because you don't want to have too many people, because as it is, there's no food. It's because it's sort of an indulgence. A person should refrain from indulging when people are b'tzar. You bring me a right from Yosef, but there are others that did. I'm sorry?
Not indulgence, Peruvu is a mitzvah.
But I guess during Shnei Rav, it should be suspended. But you're asking a very good kasha. What about the mitzvah of Peruvu? It's an excellent kasha, and we're going to address it shortly. We know that Yecheved was born on the way down to Mitzrayim, and that was still when the hunger was in full rage, and yet Levi didn't have a problem being Meshamish Mitasai, and that's how he had Yecheved. It was Levi. So clearly there was tashmish going on in the hungry year.
Reuben was not part of a nation that was not Reuben. Levi was not part of a nation that was starving.
Sure, there was hunger everywhere.
No, but Yaakov.
But
Yaakov,
not at that point. Not at that point. We discussed yesterday. Although at the beginning he still had food. At the end of the hunger, he needed food.
He needed food, but he wasn't starving.
Because they came down to Mitzrayim to buy. Sure, there was hunger.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh. But let's see what Tosha says first. It's not mandatory. It's a midas chasidus not to indulge b'shnei Ravin. So Yosef was makbid on this. Yosef leishimish, but maybe Levi did have tashmish. But other Rishonim speak out that maybe, referring to what Dubi Menzelovsky said, maybe Yosef already had a daughter. So he had a son, he had a daughter. He didn't have a chiv for Revu, so that's why he withheld tashmish. But could be Levi didn't have yet a daughter. He only had a son. So therefore he engaged in tashmish because he needed to be in the kind of the mitzvah of Revu. What does the mitzvah say?
not apply when a famine strikes when God is doing. And Yosy was thinking, customers because he thought that his family none started. In fact, it's pushing food.
So that the Chaim said. So Yosef was not showing solidarity with the Mitzrayim. He was showing solidarity with his family. Little did he know that they had it made in the shade. They were okay. Very interesting. So that's why Levi didn't have to refrain, because by Levi there wasn't the hunger. Very interesting. That's what you was probably referred to.
And the other thing is that in terms of positions, Yosef was a king. You look at the whole oil as a rule for person in that position.
Speak to Trudeau about that. Okay. Zok the Helig Gemara Vayter. I hear. Okay. He's good looking. Zok the Gemara Vayter, but it stops there. Zok the Gemara Vayter. Amar Shlokish. Also, Misham Shtos Shtei Rav and Shtei Maluyah Shtei Vadim B'Terem Tavish Nasarav. Tana, we learn. Chasuch Ivana. Someone who cannot have children, who does not have children. Rashi says Shalai Kaimu Perya Berevya. So the Allah is Mishamshim is the same. They are a lot of Tashmish B'Shnei Rav. Tana Rabban. Bismanchi Yisrael Shurin B'Tzar. If Klal Yisrael is Shuri B'Tzar, they're in a difficult spot. Upirish Echad Behen, and one fellow decides, you know what? I'm not staying here with these people. I'm out of here. Then what happens is it's not good for a person. Boyin Shnei Malachei Asharis Shemalavim Le'Adam, the two malachim that normally accompany a person. Umanichin Lo Yedeyim Al Roishay, they put their hands on his head. V'ayim Ploni Zeh Shepirish V'Nat Tzibur, this person who pulled away from the tzibur, Al Yira b'nechamas tzibur. He will not be zoicha to see when the tzibur is in the chama. And Rashi says, "T'chsiv ki malachim v'tzav malach that's the malachim." Okay. Now I believe one of the Rishonim speak out. I saw somewhere who spoke out that this only applies if he can stay there and help. But if he can't help them and he's going to save himself by running away, avada he should run away. And during the Holocaust, there were many Rabbanim who didn't want to leave their tzibur. But halacha l'maisa, if you could do something to help, avada it's a big avla to leave. But if there's nothing you can do to help and you can save yourself, avada you should save yourself.
Yosy.
Yes.
I say it was the story of Rus, is the exact prime example.
Well, and that's where he could have helped, right? Because he had money. He didn't want people to bother. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Tani idach. Bizman shas tzibur shori b'tzar al yomer adam elech levesi. I'll go to my house. In my house, I have whatever I need. The oichel, the eshter, the shalom aleichem nafshi. Person shouldn't do that. Bim oisakain all of akasav oimer v'hinei sasain v'simcha. Sure, there's problems, but for us, we'll take care of ourselves. We'll have sasan and simcha, harag bakar, shchaytzoin, echal basar, shtaisyayin, echal v'shasu, ki machar namas. Because tomorrow we're going to die. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That's where it comes from. So let's see Rashi. Hine sasav v'simcha, harag bakar, shchaytzoin, echal basar, shtaisyayin, ki machar namas. V'nigla, it says later on, Maksiv Basrei, v'nigla ba'oznei shem tzavaka, yishim mechupra aben hazeh lachem ad tamusim. So Rashi says, v'nigla ba'oznei Hashem tzavaka, yishim mechupra aben hazeh lachem ad tamusim, meaning this is a big aveira, and it's only death. It's only death that's going to be mechaper on such an aveira of someone who's so callous and not concerned about the sorrows of the tzibur, and he locks himself into his ivory tower and he parties and enjoys while everybody else is suffering. This sounds very much like our governments nowadays. Zok to Gemara, Ad Kan Midas Beinin. These are Beinin. This isn't so bad. You know why? Because you're Reim and Amisa. At the end of the day, you said Ki Machar Namos. So they're saying, right now we don't have trouble. Let's party now while things are going good. And if trouble comes, trouble will come. So they're not totally callous about everything. Aval b'midas v'shoyim. You know what it says by the midas v'shoyim? Maksiv. I saw you. Let's go party today. And tomorrow we'll party even more. So they're not even worried about the future. Tomorrow we'll make even a bigger party. They're not even worried about tomorrow we may die. Let's just party and party. Maksiv Basrei, it says about these people, Hatzadik Oved, the Tzaddik gets pulled out of this picture. The eight ish som alev. No one even thinks about it. Because of the bad, the tzaddik was pulled away. And Rashi explains what this means. Tzaddik Oved ben ish som alev. Why did the tzaddik die? HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes the tzaddikim die before these terrible things happen, so that these tzaddikim shouldn't have tsar witnessing the terrible tragedies that are going to happen. That's the first pshat Rashi says. But Rashi says another pshat. Hashem takes the tzaddik away because they're rishis. You know why? Because if they're around, they're going to daven that Hashem should save even these rishoyim. The Rebbe Hashem doesn't even want that. The Rebbe Hashem takes the tzaddik away, so the tzaddik shouldn't be there to save these people. Ella, yitzar adam in that tzibur. A person should feel the tsar with the tzibur. Sheched matinu b'Moshe Rabbeinu shetzir atzmoi im atzibur. You find by Moshe Rabbeinu as well that when the tzibur had tsar, he had tsar with them. Shenemar, where do you see this? Because it says Moshe was the king of Klal Yisrael. He had everything available to him. He was a multi-millionaire. We know he became very wealthy from the Shever Luchos. Yet it says when he was holding his hands up, the Gavar Yisrael, b'dei Moshe kfeidim, his arms became heavy. It's hard to lift your hands over your head and hold them that way so long. So what do? They didn't take a throne or a lejak or anything like that for him to relax on. They took a stone, a hard rock. We see what talked about Yosy. Did he not have something more comfortable, a pillow or a mattress or a recliner, to sit on? Since Klal Yisrael is in Tsar now, they're fighting a war, an uphill battle. I'm not going to sit on a throne in a luxurious position. I'll sit on a rock. Someone who feels the tsar of the tzibur when things are difficult, there is zoicha to see when things go up.
Aren't the shivrei luchos the broken pieces of the luchos? I think it's the psilis of the second luchos.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was the psilis. It wasn't the shivrei luchos.
Yeah, shivrei luchos. Yeah,
the shivrei luchos were actually stored.
Right.
That's right. I apologize. Yeah, thank you for correcting that. Just the psilis, just the leftovers made him a lot of money.
Of right. The second luchos, yeah.
In fact, tomorrow, B'Shema Yomer Adam. B'Shema Yomer Adam. Me may it be. Who's going to know if I in my house, I'm partying and I'm not concerned? Zok Gemara, Avnei Beisay Shal Adam, the stones, the bricks of a person's home, the Kairos Beisay, the walls of his home, Shal Adam, Me'ivin Ba'i, will say Egis on him. Shenemar Ki Even Mikir Tizah. A stone from the wall will scream out. The chafetz me'et yanena. And the Rashi says chafetz is chati levena. It's a half a row, it's a half a block that you would put between two pieces of wood. I don't know exactly how the construction was, but it's something that would be part of the wall of a home that would say testimony on its inhabitant. The Reb Shila Amri, Shnei Malachi Asharis Hamalav Leila Adam, Hein Mi Eden Alav. They're going to say Edis on him. Shenemer ki malachi v'yitzav alach, like we did earlier. Nebchita omer, Nebchitka omer, Nishmase shel adam hi me'id alav. Shenemer meshucheves chekecha. The neshama that's in your chek, Shemar pischeficha, is going to be watching all of the openings. There are those who say that even a person's limbs will say testimony about him. Shenemer atam edai ne'um Hashem. So there are mafarshim that say there's like a whole bunch of different testimonies. So someone said that the walls of a house are testimony to the dibur of a person. They hear things that he says in private when he doesn't think people are listening. That's what the walls of his house say testimony on. The neshama says testimony on his machshavas. That no one sees. The neshama is inside, and the neshama sees the machshavas. And the malachim who walk with him, they say testimony on his actions. So there's Dibur, there's Maisa and Machshava, and he has witnesses to verify all of those three properties.
Oh, so the Malachim are only accompanying him when he leaves the house.
It looks like that. Zok to Gemara. There's people in their own homes sometimes behave differently than they behave in public. And they take the liberty to do things differently, speak differently. So therefore, there's walls of his house saying, hey, Rabbi Lichter once told me that a parent of one of his students came over to him and said, I heard you said this silly little thing in class. So Rabbi Lichter says, I'll make you a deal. If you don't believe all the things that your son tells you about what goes on in my class, I won't believe all the things that your son tells me goes on in your home.
Yeah, I'm sure he got a good deal.
Zok to Gemara weiter. It says in the pasuk in Hasinu, Kela Muna Vein Ovel. Hashem's trustworthy and he's not a bad guy. And Rashi says Vein Ovel means Shein Oisa Din Beloy Din Emes V'Tzedek. Hashem does everything properly. There's a famous word that they say around Yom Naram time, which is right when they learning Hasinu. What do you mean Ein Ovel? If I ask information about a shidduch, about a bacher and a shidduch, he's not a bad guy. Ein Ovel is not bad. You're not going to take such a boy. Ein Ovel is not really a compliment. So I remember the Bali Musha says Ein Ovel means Hashem will never punish somebody if it will impact any third party in a way where they don't deserve it. So let's say someone's a balaver and he deserves to die, but his family, his friends, people who he touches in such a way where he's mechazek them, he smiles at them, he tells them good Shabbos, they're going to be hurt if he's not there, and they're not deserving of that suffering. So Ein Ovel, Hashem will never do anything, even if he has to punish somebody, where it will impact somebody. So the Bali Moshe say that's a great backdoor way to get out of din. Make sure you impact as many people as possible in a positive way, and then that'll be your loophole to be saved from any problems. Kela Muna, Kishem Shenefroim, Rishoyim L'Olam Haba, just like they're going to punish the Rishoyim in Olam Haba, Afilu Al Aveira Kala, even on a small Aveira, everything gets taken into account. Kach Nefroim in Atadikim B'Olam Hazeh Al Aveira Kala Shoyim. So too, they're going to punish the Tzaddik in Olam Hazeh. The Ein Ovel, what does the Ein Ovel means? Kishem Shemishalmin Schar LeTzadikim L'Olam Haba, Afilu Al Mitzvah Kala Shoyim. Just like the schar for the mitzvahs of the tzaddikim, even the little ones are saved for them, so they get their full schar in Olam Haba. Kach mishalom schar l'rishayim by the mazeh. Hashem pays up the rishayim in full in Olam Hazeh. Afilo mitzvah kala shoysim. They will get paid back in full. Of course, it's much better to get paid back in Olam Haba, but Hashem will still make sure everyone will get paid. And Rashi says the reason why Hashem pays back the rishayim every last detail in Olam Hazeh is because they don't deserve Olam Haba. So Hashem wants to make sure that they're paid up for all the good deeds in Olam Hazeh. So they're not concerned. So they're very happy with their deal. Yeah, very good. Zok to Gemara. Kach Misham Schal Yishol B'Olam Hazeh. Afilo Mitzvah Kol Shor. Tzaddik v'Yosher. Hashem is a tzaddik v'Yosher. So Rashi says, Matzdik Adin Ala Tzaddikim L'Froya Mehem. He makes sure that everyone's taken care of. All of his maisim are in front of him. And they ask him, and someone said over that they show you a television screen with a split screen. One will be a video of what your life was, and one will be a video of what your life could have and should have been. And the closer they match, the better off you are. What? So I like there's a GPS on you as well. Everything they know about you, what, when, where. Who Aimer? Hey, and the person can't deny it. The person says yes, this information is correct. So there's even acceptance from the person himself. They say, sign here that you're testifying that all this is true and just. Rashi says, the person declares and signs that everything is accurate. The Neshama is going to say, you're right. All of the Einshim that I've been condemned to is correct.
For everybody who's getting very depressed, and for everybody on Zoom who's listening to this, Shula, Tfilo, Tzedakah, Lavir, Nesreya, Gezerah.
Oh, geweldig. Skoyach. L'kaim ha-shenemar l'man titztak b'dvarecha. Shumatztich alav b'dvarecha shatamar lo. Everything is justified. Yes, we could fix this. Very, very good. Thank you, Chaim Tzvi. That's right. Otherwise, it could be a little bit depressing. Amar Shmuel, kol ha-yoshev b'tainis nikra chayte. And in Hollywood, those when they have a movie premiere, all of the actors in the movie are excited to be there at the big premiere on the red carpet, the big night. But when we watched our movie that we starred in, that we were the main actors, we would do anything not to have to watch that movie. It's not going to be as exciting. Amar Shmuel,
That's because there's an editor. Hollywood stars starts with an editor.
But Baruch Hashem, with Tshuva, we also have an editor.
Oh, saying good.
There's no lawyers. Everybody who sits the Taanis is called a chayte. So the very to fast, the very to inflict yourself. Sobar ki haytana, the Tanya, Rabbi Lazar Kvar, Berebi Omer, Ma Talmud Loimer, the Chibur Olav, Masher Chata ala Nefesh. This is speaking about a Nazir. The Chibur Eze Nefesh Chata. What Avera did the Nazir do? He didn't kill anybody. The Nazir restrained himself and refrained from drinking wine. That's his avla. You can make a kal v'chomer. Nazir, who only held himself back from drinking wine. Everything else he ate and drank. The Torah calls him a chayte b'nefesh. So I'm a tzaratzim called davar v'davar. If you fast, which means you're not eating anything at all, alachas kama v'kama, surely that would be considered a chayte. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, nikra kadosh. A nazir is a kadosh. And the Rishonim say that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not a chayte. He's a chayte and a kadosh. Shenemar kadosh yeh gedel pera sarosha. So you can make a kavachomer. Umazesh like tzir atmi elamidav echad nikra kadosh. From a tzir atmi chadavar, if someone fasts, alachas kama v'kama, he's a kadosh. Tomorrow ulu Shmuel ikri kadosh. Shmuel, you called him a chayte. You see, he's called a kadosh. Zok Gemara, Shmuel holds he's not a kadosh. You know why? Ahu agido parakai. It doesn't say the person, the nazir's kadosh. It says the hair that grew. That's kadosh. That's kadosh. Ulu Rabbi Lazar hanikra chayte. Rabbi Lazar who holds the kadosh. We see that the nazir is called the chayte as well. Zok Gemara, ahu desoiv nafshe. The chayte, Rabbi Lazar learns, is not speaking about a nazir who fulfilled his naziris without becoming tamei. He's talking about a nazir that became tamei, and the chet is that he became tamei. In fact, mi Amar Rabbi Lazar hachi. Did Rabbi Lazar say that it's kadosh? Amar Rabbi Lazar la'olam yamud adam atzmai. A person should always measure himself. Ki ilu kadosh sharud v'seich meyav. He has to look at himself like he's a carbon. Rashi says, "Kilu kol meyav kadosh." Like all of his intestines are kadosh, but also like chishan. It's also to make your body weak because it's kedusha. The pasuk kadosh. It should be also to fast. Sorry, but tsar. That's going back later to the pasuk. But I call upon him. If your body is considered kadosh, you don't have a right to weaken it. We had this pasuk earlier that Hashem won't come into Yerushalayim Shalmaila until Yerushalayim Shalmata is perfect. So tomorrow, like Kasha, if Rashi says if a person can handle time, he's a strong guy, he can live without so much food, then it's not a problem. But this is a person who's not able to withstand the tinus, and therefore it's an avla if he fasts. And that's why it's brought down in halacha that someone who has a job, it's also for him to fast. Because by weakening yourself, you're stealing from your talmidim, you're stealing from your employer, you're stealing because you're not bringing your A game if you're fasting. There's a famous tinus arrived That is not that you don't eat, but you leave over a little bit. Sometimes it's very hard. You're in the middle of eating and you leave over a little bit. So there are those who learn pshat in the Gemara. If a person can eat and then just stop at the end, and he has such discipline, then it's an avla if he fasts, because the Taanis Harayvid is a much better fast. If it's a guy who's not able to do that, he doesn't have such discipline, the only way for him to fast is to fast completely, then we'll let him fast. So it's completely different from the way Rashi went.
Also the dogs, he fasted for 30 years.
Right?
By the time the doctor told him he can't fast. So after 25 years, he decided that he's going to fast from a Taanis dibur. And he commented, he said, my parents got back at me. They were all upset when I used to fast daily.
Right.
And now this Taanis dibur, this is how they're getting back at me.
Because it's harder.
Very easy for me to fast from food. But to fast from speech,
It's very hard.
that's hard.
Wow. Someone who fasts is called a chassid. Shenemar goymal nafshoy ish chesed. And it means, what does the goymal nafshoy means? It means he stops eating. Yitzchak stopped eating from his mother. The oicher she'eroi. Rashi says it means someone who fasts and weakens he weakens himself. It says oicher she'eroi amasana machshutari nikra achs. Omar b'sheishes har bar beira. Yosy betanisa a bar beira was a Talmud Chacham who sits betainis. It's as if a dog came and ate his lunch. In other words, there's no mila to his fast. Rashi says, the fasting does not accomplish anything for him. We look at him like he fasted because he didn't have lunch today, but nothing to do. It's not a mila. It's not a good thing to fast. In Bavel, the only time they had a Taanis Tibur was in Tisha B'Av. And Rashi tells us that the Taanis that we're talking about is all the Chaymer Taanis, that only happened on Tisha B'Av. And there are those who say the reason for that is because they never had the Taanis for rain, because as we said in Bavel, since it was a low land, they always had plenty of irrigation even without rain, so they only had to fast the regular Taanis. Rabbi Abba Omer Shlakish. Ein Tam Chacham Rishoy Leisha V'Tainis. A Tam Chacham may not sit in Tainis. If they Shemamayit the Malacha Shemayim. Cholash Ben Yachalumay. So he has no right to fast. Zakt Gemara Vayta. Oichlin V'Shoyshin Mishech HaShech. So now we're going to learn about Kabbalah to Tainis. We know that whenever we fast, we're Makabal the Tainis in Mincha Shmoneh Esrei the day before. So Amar Abzira Amar Puna. Yachad Shekibel Al Tainis. If a Yachad was Makabal Tainis by Mincha, right? Even if you ate and drank all night, which is what we'll do normally because we only fast starting in the morning. Tomorrow morning, he could say Anenu. What if he fasted overnight, so at the end of the Taanis, without making a new Kabbalah, he just continued fasting until the next morning? So the next morning by Shachris, Einem is Baal Shal Taanis. He's not allowed to say a name. Because there was no Kabbalah Taanis for that. Omer Yosy, Micah Sover Rav Huna. What does Rav Huna hold? Svir lei, Ein Misan L'Shois. And Rashi explains that what happened was this guy was fasting into the night. And not at the beginning of the night, but further on into the night, after it was dark, an hour or two already, he decided, you know what? I'm going to fast down more. So he's not even being Makabal a full day. He started the middle of the night that he wants to be Makabal Taanis. So do you say you cannot fast at all? You cannot make a Chiyuv Taanis at all? L'shois, because it's not a full day. Or maybe that would be a good Kabbalah Taanis. But V'Misana L'shois, Einim Mispal for this Taanis. It is a Kabbalah, and you're Mechuyev to fast. It's just that you don't say Anenu for such a type of fast. Amalei Abaye, Zokt Abaye, La'olam Kasov Rav Huna Misanan L'shois, and V'Misana L'shois Mispal Tfilas Taanis. Maybe Rav Huna holds that even though you're Makabal Taanis in the middle of the night, it's a good Kabbalah, and that would mandate that you should say Anenu the next morning. The shiny Hacha, the Kashois Delelya, the Loikibal Ali Meikara. The reason why he doesn't say Anenu is because the beginning of the night he did not makabel the Taanis. So if you're makabel the Taanis l'shoyis, it would normally be good. But over here the problem is you waited till for the day to start already, and you were makabel the Taanis in the middle. That's where you do not say a name. Let's see Rashi over here. You could fast for parts of a day, and and you'll say anenu even though you're only makabel Taanis for part of a day. Why over here did Reb Huna say in this case that you don't say anenu? The shiny hacha heicha disana esma. Here he fasted yesterday. He just continued fasting from yesterday, but there was no kabbalas Taanis, right? There was no kabbalas Taanis. So kibbutz of Taanis said, if they atzmai me esmo kedech shar mishan l'shoyis. If he would have accepted a Taanis l'shoyis yesterday by mincha, sure this would have been a bona fide Taanis, and he would have said anenu. But here in the middle of the night, he decided to accept the Taanis, and therefore by nechoshev l'spal Allah anenu. So you would say anenu even if you were makabel a Taanis l'shoyis, as long as you were makabel it by the mincha before. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Mar Ukva, before we continue, I just want to mention one thing, and that is that we talk about anenu. So we know that the Shliach Tzibur, he says anenu by shachris, but Yechidim don't say anenu in Shemini Esrei until mincha. And the reason for that is because we're afraid that a person won't be able to continue fasting. So he might not make it till chatzos because he might be weak. He might have to break his fast, and therefore only the Shliach Tzibur says anenu, because for sure somebody is going to fast the whole day. But each individual should only say b'mincha. And if we have time, we'll look at Taanis because Taanis discusses this. Zok Mar Ukva ikla leginzik. Mar Ukva showed up to a city called Ginzik. They had the following three questions for him. A was misan l'shoyis or a misan l'shoyis. Could you be makabel Taanis for half a day? Lahava biyadei. Mar Ukva did not have the answer to that question. Kan kanim shel nochin asur no mitar. If you have treifa kalim of a nochri, are you allowed to use them? And Rashi clarifies the question, and the question is, shemachnisin ben yain lakiyim asur l'shtamish ben. Are you allowed to use them without waiting 12 months? Now there's a halacha that if you wait 12 months, you're allowed to use them. We're not trying on that. But if you add to it additional kulas, then there are a makkah to be makel. So if you don't use, let's say you have a dishwasher, if you don't use it for 12 months, and you rinse it out 3 or 4 times, there's different term that if you combine them together, if you ask a poisek, there'll be ways. But nobody holds just waiting 12 months alone by itself will be mater yisurim. But his question was, is there any way to clean out the kankanim shal nachrin before waiting a year? Again, he didn't have the answer. And the third question he asked is, Moshe Rabbeinu did the avodah during the Shiva Shvei Meluah, right? The question is, what did he wear? What type of begadim did he wear? The Ma'ashimish Moshe called Shiva Shvei Meluah. Did he wear big tekuna? Big tekuna is for the kohen. There are those who say that it's a lom de shtickle. It's a lom de shayla. Is big tekuna a din in the avodah, or is big tekuna a din the kohen has to wear big tekuna is a separate mitzvah? And the fact is, a machlokes for shoydim if wearing big tekuna is a separate mitzvah, or if it's just a tnai doing the avodah. So could be that's the shayla over here. Is it didn't the avodah, or is it didn't stop the wear it and then Moshe would have? But how would be other? He didn't know. So Azul v'shol by midrasha, he went to ask in the Bismedish to see what the Olam thought about these 3 shaylas. Amar that I told him. First of all, look about the first shayla. Hilchos misanin l'shoyis u'mispalin tfilas Taanis. So you could be makabel a Taanis for half a day, and you'll say anenu. V'hilchos kankanim shel nochrim lachash neimas shechodesh mutar. The kankanim of nochrim, if you leave them for 12 months, they'll be mutar. Rashi says why? Because hoylach tam yain nesach, the taste in the barrels will dissipate. Umutarim below irumayim, they're mutar even without rinsing them out. You have to soak it in water for 24 hours, 3 times. There are coolers nowadays if you do both, but that's something that we have to discuss with the Rav. And then the Meshimas Moshe called Yizayin Yemei Meluyim, the Chaluk Lavan. He wore a plain white begodim. Rav Kahana Masni, Rav Kahana added, and he said the Chaluk Lavan she'ein ba'imra. It didn't have a hem. You know why he couldn't have a hem? because he was afraid people will say, "Oh, you probably stashed away some money. You stole gold from the base of Mikdash." So he had to be squeaky clean. Amr Rav Chisda said, "Hadamet l'shoyis." That we say you can fast l'shoyis. We'll stop. We'll learn that later. If we have a couple of minutes, it's kedai to quickly chop a rhyme. There's Taanis which talks a little bit about a Taanis Sibur. So it says, "Lon b'tanisa," a fellow who didn't break his fast at the end of the fast, rather he continued fasting. Pirish sheshana yom and uvalayla ochal. At night, normally when you break your fast, he didn't break his fast. He continued to fast. Belon b'tanis. Zok Taanis afagav shalina hayom mikoyach Taanis shekibul alav. Even though the fact that he extended his Taanis the next night is really a continuation of the previous Taanis that he was makabel properly by Mincha. Nevertheless, Einim is Baal Tfilas Taanis. He will not say Anenu. Ubahag Gavni Yesh Oichol Umispalo Tfilas Taanis. I'm not sure what this means. The Bahag says Yesh Oichol. The Bahag says the Bahag says you could eat and you could be Mispal Tfilas Taanis. How does that work? Mufarish Kumahacha. The Beshachris Omer Tfilas Taanis. By Shachris they'll say Tfilas Taanis. Afal Pisha Achal Kol Alayla. Even though he ate all night, because if you're makabel taanis for the next day, even though you eat at night, you're eating at night and you're still saying anenu in the morning. The yesh misana, there are those who fast, she'enim mispal, kamoy ba'arvis, aval pi shaloyochal, and then there are those who fast and they don't say anenu. You don't say anenu by meir. We don't say anenu by shachris. Shema nimtza shakrin b'tfilosa. You might end up being a shakrin. Why? You might not be able to finish the Taanis. So therefore you shouldn't say Anenu by Shachris. I hold the Taanis that you wouldn't be a Shachrin anyway. You could say Anenu by Shachris. Even though your intent in the morning was to fast the whole day. Even though an Oinus happened later that he couldn't, that doesn't it shouldn't be any worse than somebody who only fasted a little bit. Where we say in our Gemara that's considered a fast. Geshamim came before Chatzois, they don't have to finish the Taanis. They probably did say Anenu in the morning before it rained. Okay, so that's all I wanted to bring up. So let me just see if he brings up about Tefillah. No, he doesn't. Oh yeah, it says V'Nahagin. That's here at the bottom. The Shliach Tzibur does say Anenu by Shachris. To remind everybody that the Taanis today, you lahaskar Taanis. A Yachid would only say Tal Mincha, Utur Arachaim, Omer Shlich Tzibur, B'chol Pam, She'ev Shalei Shanuk Sas Mikol. Will always be someone fasting. I never saw the.
What if you daven an early mincha?
So you still say a name because you fast until Chatzois. You fast till Chatzois is good enough.
Once it's after Chatzois, there you go.
I think so.
I always took out.
We're not worried that you're going to break. You're not worried that you're not going to make it. You're going to break your fast.